Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger. Welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today is Robert Rasmussen. And we are talking for the very first time. I think we're now 2 minutes into a relationship. And so you're going to see something that I think hopefully will be an example to you that you can try this as well. You can go start a relationship without having hardly any knowledge of who this other person is. So, Robert, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. Do you prefer Ed or Eddie?
You can call me either one, but Ed is typically Eddie's more of a
Okay.
title. The Eddie is the title, but yeah, Ed is fine.
Okay. Well, it's really nice to meet you face to face, Ed. And yeah, a little about me. I live in California, Southern California, San Diego, with my beautiful wife of 35 years, who is Norwegian. And I think we share some things that are kind of fun. I met my wife at a Bible college in the 1989, and
Huh.
we fell very quickly in love. We did some youth ministry together a long time ago, and that's something that doesn't show up on my resume
Yeah.
too often anymore. But it's also, of course, always a part of who I am.
I
So
love
my
that.
wife and I, we raised two wonderful children. One, our daughter Catherine is an artist and lives in the Austin area, and our son lives down the street here in San Diego. One of them got away, and we held tighter to the second one. So, and Kevin is my son. Him and I are starting a nonprofit right now, so just in the inception phase. And maybe we'll wander back onto that along the road here because I'm doing a lot of different things. We also spent 10 years in Norway, where we raised our children between 2001 and 2011, which were very, I say, interesting years in the US because we left before 9/11 and
Yeah.
came back kind of a decade later and visited along the way, sort of watching some cultural transformation of my culture from afar, and really enjoyed raising kids in Scandinavia. Different, completely different vibe. Changed me, uh, and a lot of my story now, a lot of things I do now are rooted in that. So I also, when I came back from Europe, quite soon after I came back, I started a company with my cousin. We are now 12 years into that journey, and we are called Agile Six, and we are about, I want to say we're bumping around 100 employees now, and and what we do is one of our bigger projects is a lot of work on the VA's website, va.gov, but we build high touch, hopefully humane, human centered digital services for citizens and taxpayers. So trying to put a friendlier front porch on our government services. And we've been through a few administrations, so our mission has bumped around a bit. Very close to something called, or formerly called, the United States Digital Service, and now called the United States Doge Service, which is so we've worked very close with Doge, and there are stories around there. At one point, we were closer to the folks that saved the healthcare.gov website, if you remember that, some time ago.
Yeah.
And Obama referred to the community generally as his SWAT team. So we worked and incepted sort of in those days. Then this is our second Trump administration, and like everything close to government, you try to ride the waves of change and make change. But also, I'm in this season personally where I've already selected my successor, a protege of mine who's been working with me for 5 years, and so I'm also in this phase moving out of the CEO founder role into part-time, uh, part retired, part-time
Yeah.
chairman, and I find space in my life, and that's where I think I run into a lot of your work and a lot of great people trying to sort of, I would say, reinvent our culture, but find. And I'm working on a book, for example, right now called. It's tentatively called "Room to Be Human," and it's sort of drawing on all of the space I enjoyed before I came back, and the what I call time poverty, and I think it's the single perhaps largest challenge of our culture right now is that we don't have space to know that we need space. So I find myself time rich and enjoying that. Yeah, and that's me. And there's a number of projects I'm working on with that space, and trying not to fill it all, but um, just enjoying the still being here on this planet and hopefully making it a little nicer.
I mean, I've got so many questions. I don't know which one to where to start. Um, but I think I want to start with it's really clear from your weblog or your website,
Yeah.
whatever it is, that you are interested in human-centered is not the right word, but more of a human type of organization where humans have an opportunity to flourish as a member of a team or a member of an organization, and that the organization is aware and sensitive to how people not only want to work together, but what they have to offer within an organizational context. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the word humanist is I notice it growing in my consciousness and for a lot of people now. I think it's
Yeah.
as I grew up in the church, it was not something I was allowed to actually entertain. I think I was always raised that it's a friendship with the world is enmity with God, and so I was raised that sort of humanism was incompatible with faith traditions. And so I'm sometimes hesitant to use the word humanist, but I have said at times humanist leadership. And in fact, I'm working on another book. It's a little further back, but generally called malpractice. And the idea is that leadership from a place of non-transcendence, like trying to lead people, if you don't embrace the full scope of your own humanity with self-compassion and understanding first and foremost that leading is about going into unsafe spaces and making them safe. Then you have to have sort of a natural curiosity and a natural interest in human beings. And I think so much of our pain, both in the corporate organizations and collectively in our culture today, is a product of us dehumanizing each other and sort of a scarcity-based mindset that keeps us dehumanizing each other. So all of that, yes, starts in the workplace. And I was blessed to work for 10 years in a Norwegian company that was just table stakes. And so sometimes when I go back to Norway and I talk to my friends, and we go back every summer, we have a place just one floor down from my in-laws. So we have a little flat there and we spend time with family. And for example, in the summer, they have something called Fellesferie, which is it translates to common vacation. And so the idea is that not only do all Norwegians have 5 weeks vacation, like all of them, even if you work at fast food, you're also guaranteed that I think 3 weeks of those vacation time is common vacation. So you're off. You have time. You're off when all your other family members are off, when your competitors are off. Your phone is actually turned off. And it's just a beautiful 3 weeks. And every time I experience it, so we make sure to get back there for that every year. And every time I experience it, I think that this is what I want for my country. Just this space, this time to, without the pressure of, answering the phone or worrying if your competitor's talking to your customer. And so I think it's my overwhelming urge to promote those kind of ideas here. And that's what I mean when we say we don't have space to realize what it's like. And I grew up in a very in inner city Los Angeles, very typical story. Many homes, many schools. Um, Never was a college candidate. I mean, I barely made it through high school. And then I went into this sort of crushing system where I spent 25 years. Bible school for me was the only school that would take me, honestly. So for 2 years, it was a refuge. But then I went through sort of 20 years of running from scarcity to only to realize that it was false, that there was never anyone at my back. And so I had this experience in Norway, and when I came back to the States, I was committed to it. And there's a little story tucked in the middle there where towards the end of my Norwegian experience, I took a job with an American company and tried to become this different person, ended up in the hospital with panic attacks. And so when I came back to the States and I tried to embrace the 9 years that were great, not the 1 year that was troubling. And the first time in my life, I went into an interview and said, I'm going to be me. I promised myself, because I would be one person to my customers, one person to my wife, one person to my children, and one person in the mirror. And so when I started interviewing that way, I would actually say stuff to my potential employers, like, hey, just so you know, my family comes first, and I need my weekends, and I'm happy to give you everything I got for 8 hours a day. So I said these kind of things in interviews, and I found a couple better jobs. I found a couple better jobs.
Yeah.
And then they always failed what I was looking for, so I started my own.
Yeah.
And a good deal of those people that I met in those better jobs, they work for me now. They came with us, and I just realized kind of if I wanted that, either I had to either make it happen or I had to go back to Norway. So I had to figure out like what would happen. And what we learned with myself and my founding partners was it was kind of the idea was really that the owners of the equity of the firm have to put their values first behind every dollar, and that's just so rare. And so we were, and it was tested many times, but putting sort of profit as a byproduct of purpose and just going in on people, and it worked. And I think if you visit our website, we have a blog page where they're all video blogs of people that I think honestly and sincerely feel blessed to have an employer like that. Now, it's not everything I wanted to do because, as I mentioned sometimes in my blog, other forces are always coming in on our little world. But for example, it's quite okay to call in sad. We have unlimited wellness, and we just say you manage yourself. You know better than me if you're going to where you're going to thrive, when you're going to thrive, how you're going to thrive, and I'm going to trust you to be an adult. And I find it's a very interesting thing that people, when you trust people, they're more trustworthy. When you doubt them, they're less trustworthy, and they're their best own determinants of what's best for them. So, but all of that is table stakes in Norway. So to my point is when I go back, they just say, "Oh, you're building a Norwegian company."
Well, that's one of those places I've wanted to go to. I've interviewed a fair amount of people from Scandinavian countries,
Yeah,
and I really like them. And even with a couple of guys in Copenhagen, we've talked about doing an event, which would be like an Eddie Network podcast conversation. And I've tried that once. I was in London a year and a half ago, and I just invited everybody I knew in England to come meet me at a pub on a Sunday afternoon, and seven showed up, and some of these people knew each other, but they'd never been together, and so we spent 2 hours, and it was a beautiful thing. I think my part of my question about the structure of what you've done is, do you feel like you're recapturing something that has been lost, or are you creating something that is new and is emergent in the world?
I like to believe that it's emergent. So um, I ran it. So first 5 or 6 years, I felt very weird, and in fact, because my other partners, where I felt they all believed the same at some level that we wanted to be a great place to work. I think some of my ideas, especially around trust-based teams, like really radical trust, um, made me feel weird for a while. my aversion to sort of over planning, and I had this sort of a natural sense of unfolding and letting, sensing and responding as a leader and letting the universe uh, manifest. And all that stuff felt very little bit weird until a guy named Frederick Laloux published a book called Reinventing Organizations. And for the people who know that book, for some of us, the story became, oh, not so weird anymore. There's a lot of people around the world discovering the same sort of higher capabilities of human beings, given the chance. And so, for example, we never had sales targets because I just kind of naturally felt we would attract our customers and we would attract our employees, and we would grow at the rate that became organically available. And yet, we were for a few years the fastest growing company in San Diego without sales goals, without targets. But the idea that being sort of, again, abundant minded, that, hey, if I am honest with who I am, the universe, there are people for me out there. The universe will respond with different kinds of customers, different kinds of employees. And so, but I think Frederick Laloux's work in 2014, I think the book was published. So it's not cutting edge, but I really recommend reading it because I cried through it. It's quite a long book, but I saw myself in it. And a lot of the examples, one of the main examples is a company called Patagonia, which we've all heard of. And he wrote this book called Let My People Surf, and I think that's the same vibe is like, don't hold them so hard. And I've read a lot of books. But one of them that struck me was The Happiness Advantage, which Sean Aker, I think it was. And he said, that human beings are 73% more creative at a state of happy than neutral or sad. And so you start to see the ROI in being present and your people being happy and maybe working less but more inspired, more engaged, more self-determined. And I think it's such an opportunity for an entrepreneur to put profit in the back seat and still make a great living, and then on people's passions, on people's dreams, and not on just on their sweat. And I think that now I'm in a season where I'm financially secure. I have time, and I want to kind of run back into the burning building and say we don't have to. We don't have to be efficiency and extraction minded. We can be fully, evolvent, emergent human beings.
Right.
A lot of people in our company change jobs midway. Sometimes they leave, some have left to mission work in Africa or even to one of our competitors. The difference is we celebrate that. I just get a really big kick out of self-actualization and seeing people because I think it's my journey. I came from a place where I didn't have access to any of that. And these people in Norway sort of sat on me with love for 10 years. And, I kept hearing his voice. It's enough. It's enough. It's enough. Be here with us.
So you're saying things, that I've seen for a long time, but I
Yeah.
saw them as missing in the organizations that I served, particularly after I became a consultant in 1995. I was seeing things. I'm a big picture person, so I'm seeing what's going on, and my question was, can they see what's going on? Can they see why things aren't working for them? Can they see that they are setting up their own conditions for failure? Can they see this at all? And what I found was that there was this insecurity on the part of the people who were in leadership. And so they couldn't deal with reality. And so they had to create some kind of story that hid their own insecurities and kind of compartmentalized the people in their business or in their nonprofit or their church or whatever it may be. And as a result, they suffered.
Yeah. I think I was blessed to experience sort of this midlife crisis very early. And I think it was facilitated by my particular journey. some of it probably childhood induced PTSD, some of it military induced PTSD, but then going to Norway and being held in a sort of abundance society, um, and rejecting it out of my instinct,
Yeah.
rejecting it, and then being thrown, you know, I went into a job. I tell you, it was the opposite of that. I took a job traveling every week to five, uh, five countries in Europe every week.
Wow.
And my job was to show up and I didn't know this when I took it, and scare people. Like we had Ukrainian and Russian developers, and my job was to show up and scare people. And I quickly lost myself. I quickly just lost my identity. I would come home and I wouldn't remember, so I didn't know which mask I was staring at in the mirror. And I think this caused such a break in me that nothing scares me more than that anymore. So in terms of having confidence to go all out on some crazy things. And so self-actualizing again, finding my identity again, and then committing to it. I would rather lose every dollar in my pocket than my identity. I just can't lose that again. And I can't be a part of taking it away from other people. In fact, my biggest joy in life is giving people space to unfold organically again themselves. And that I've found to be a very profitable enterprise. The creative energy, the ideas, we're just it's this picture. And I think one thing that hit me recently is I've struggled with this idea, is I find, especially here in the States, when I talk about abundance mindset versus scarcity, like people, if you can't see past a certain, if you can't transcend a certain, say, place on Maslow's hierarchy, if you can't get there, the world looks scarce. And somebody who talks about abundance sounds like rude. It sounds kind of mean. And so, one thing that got into my mind this past few months is the doorway between these two mindsets is simply gratitude. So can you find a place where you're saying, okay, I'm grateful for that I've got my identity back, Ed. After that, if you've fallen down the hierarchy of needs and climbed back up a few times, you realize that it's no matter where you are materially, abundance is right in front of you. You just have to say, and I heard this a lot with my Swedish and Norwegian colleagues out here all the time. They remind me that we won the birth lottery. And that's a very Scandinavian thing, to just wake up in the morning and, collectively we are rich, collectively. And that's what they'll push back. There's something called the Jante's law. We can go into that for a while, but basically if you stick your head up, it's going to get cut off. And that's kind of negatively viewed by Americans. But I think the flip side of it is you can be proud of you as a part of we, and you can feel safe as you on the shoulders of we. And
Mm.
so they wake up in the morning from this place of gratitude, and this idea that there is enough. And I remember pushing back and saying, because people would tell me, some say, Robert, you're working so much, don't you have enough? And I would always get angry and say, who are you to tell me what's enough? I'll say enough when Robert's decided it's enough. But this concept of gratitude, and that there is enough, and this, we go back to our spiritual roots, and this was Jesus' ministry, right? This was Jesus' ministry saying, um, you know, think of the lily, think of the sparrow, we're all going to be fine, and the only way that we get to a place where we share, the feeding of the fish and bread is when we say, hey, on faith, there is enough here. It'll go around, and then we can be satisfied, and then the world becomes so abundant, right? So I think it's fear and scarcity versus joy and abundance. And I think the doorway is just gratitude. And so we should be teaching people that.
20 years ago, you were in Norway 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
um, but there was this thing that moved through the American culture where gratitude was sort of hyped up, and
Yeah.
the whole thing was about uh, helping yourself feel grateful. And so people were putting up gratitude boards and things like that, and I felt like it was so inadequate.
Yes.
And I said so, and I'm an action oriented person, so I'm interested in people taking this. So I came up with there's a longer story to this, but I came up with what I call the 5 actions of gratitude. And they are: say thanks every day, give back, make welcome,
Mm,
honor others, and create goodness. And what I would talk about in doing that is trying to encourage business leaders to set up a program in their companies where their people measured that. How many times today did I say thank you? How many times today did I honor someone? How many, and it and the part of that purpose was to help them
yes,
identify, what does that mean? What does it mean for me to act with honor towards someone? Or what does it mean for me, for us as a company to make welcome? And what I was seeing there was, how do we lower the boundaries, the barriers to people taking leadership as soon as they become a part of the company, as soon as they become a part of the team? How can we put them in a position where they can lead us because we're inviting them in to join us, and so we're going to make them welcome so that they'll become contributors, those sort of things.
that's beautiful.
I traveled with that as a thing, particularly in churches, for a couple of years, and then it just, after the recession, it just died away because nobody was feeling grateful after that. And but it comes back every now and then. Someone talks about gratitude. I say, oh well, this is something where you can actually do something. And if you were to do those 5 things on a daily basis, your life would change. Definitely.
I think they absolutely would. And I did an experiment once with a group in one of those OK jobs when I first came back, trying to lift that collective. And I forget where I got this experiment, but I put a tissue box, those little Kleenex boxes, and I wrapped it up nice and put it outside my office and with sticky pads. And I said, just for a month, I'd like everybody to stop by my office and put in the pad something you're grateful for today, and just put a little note in the box. And at the end of the month, we just threw it away. But the practice of just starting your day to be grateful for something in your life, it's just the practice of being grateful is tremendous. One of my also, I think, secret weapons for myself personally, and we train all of our staff at Agile 6 and make resources available in the concept of nonviolent communication,
Mhm.
Marshall Rosenberg. And I really can't, like, one of the best books I think I can recommend for anybody in their interpersonal relationships but is nonviolent communication from Marshall. But also, I think the thing that in the practice that's most beautiful is you think, you hear about it, something between human beings, but the interpersonal work of self-compassion. And I think it's really really wonderful. You start to have better relationships with yourself and better dialogues with yourself and compassionate, nonviolent dialogues with yourself. I think there's a great deal of ability that you produce in that practice, to start to see needs, your own needs, and also making requests of others to meet those, and then you get into this relationships of service to others' needs. So we're hearing each other, we're feeding each other, and not feeding on each other. And I think that has been the most transformational thing to protect the culture in our journey. But it's also been the best thing that I've ever done for myself and my relationship with my kids. And I wrote a book called Better Places a few years ago. And one of the things that I mentioned is, like, my greatest regret is not having those tools with my father before he passed, because we fed on each other, and I never understood his posture. Why are we so at each other's throats? I can't. It just comes up. Like, it was an instinct. And if you have those relationships in your life, I think I really recommend that, Marshall Rosenberg. Um, Sorry, I thought about that when you talked about these five habits as well, because I think it's we are not intentional enough with ourselves. And self
You
care is an
understand?
industry.
Do you understand
Yeah,
why? You understand why we're not intentional enough?
I mean, I have ideas. I don't think we're raised that way.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I think there's a few books that have changed my life recently, but One of them, few of them have to do with are by Aldous Huxley, but the island, Aldous Huxley, and
Hmm.
sort of raising how they raised the idea in this community in Paula was that they raised people to be connected to ecology, connected to the world, grateful for the abundance that's around us, self-compassionate and compassionate to others. But I don't think I was raised that way. I think I may have been raised the opposite in all of those domains. But do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I do, and I think that well, one of them was that I recognized early on. I can't go into the depth of all this, but I recognized early on that I needed to treat my children differently,
Mm,
and what I came to see is that I needed to treat them as adults as young as I could.
mm, yes.
So my oldest was 12, 11 or 12 when I started that, and then my second son was he would have been 8, and my daughter would have been 5 or 6 at that point in time. And what I was doing was I was not answering their questions. I was answering their questions with a question. They say, "Well, why did so and so say that? Why are they doing that?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" Because I
Mm,
wanted them to think it through and I wanted them to process things. And what emerged from that was, for better or for worse, they became very independent thinkers. But they're
mm,
also my best friends
yes.
because the communication we had was not like the parent-child or the kind of the master-slave kind of relationship. It was much more like, okay, we're in different generations, we're at different points in our life, but we all have something to teach one another. And and when my oldest son was 15, 16, we'd been in scouting for
Mm,
4 years at that point, and then we changed scout troops, and then the scout master left, and I got thrust into that role, and I didn't know what to do. So I told my sons, I said, "Listen, I don't know what I'm doing here. And so we're going to debrief every Thursday night on the way home. You're going to tell me what I need to see, what I need to know." And out of that emerged a team orientation, not only with my sons, but with the adult leaders. I had 19 adult leaders who were assistant scoutmasters in a committee. And what I discovered, I saw them teaching me what I needed to discover about myself, which was I'm the guy who stands up in front and reminds people this is who we are.
mm,
And these others are going to manage the process that's going on. I don't have to be the sheriff. All I need to be is kind of the chief and say, this is who we are. These are our principles. We're always going to operate according to these 5 things. And what emerged was it gave everyone, both adult and child, boy, the freedom to establish their own example of leadership or their own process of being a leader in the context of the troop. We became one of the top troops in our council as a result of that.
that's fantastic. I share
Yeah.
that as well. I was in the Boy Scouts a long time, and one of my best friends and I, we were the senior troop leader and junior troop leader. But I think to your point, I have a strong aversion or strong feeling that leadership and independence are two constructs that are overrated in our culture. And I'm not saying that, but I just think we have more leaders than followers, and there's not a lot of true servant leadership going
Yeah.
on. People are not vulnerable and authentic enough to be interdependent. And I think there's strength in interdependence, in organic expression, in moving authority to where information lives instead of sending it up, sending it down. And I think that you also have non-transcendent people feeling obligated to climb ladders and be leaders. And this, then and to your point, why am I not compassionate with myself? I wasn't, because I wasn't in charge. It's only when I kind of got to the top of my own culture, my own company, that I could say, hey, one, I don't really like this that much. It's not really who I am. And then B, I don't like pretending to be something that I'm not. Again, the masks. So when we first started the business, I think I was somewhat. I think I got some slack from or some friction from my business partners, because um, my English had been diluted a bit too. So my grammar sometimes slipped. My polish, I never had my father was the same way, rather unpolished man. But polish just never was important to me. And then I went in Norway, I indulged in that unpolished life. I mean, Norwegian cops or policemen don't even iron their uniforms all the time. We'll see people showing up to the same shirt 3 days in a row in a professional setting. It's just less polished. It's just not that important. Um, and so when I showed up at Agile 6 at less polished, I think some in the beginning, my business partners tried to polish me. But over time, we realized that that was my strength. I'm okay showing up unpolished, and I think when you do, a different kind of leadership emerges where people can relate and say, hey, but I think that that's one of my messages is like, I think there's a lot of leadership malpractice in the world, and we induce it on ourselves, because if we're not, I know we built a little bit of a hierarchy, and then we started to flatten it, and I started to remove all the VP titles, and I lost people over that. I said, I remember one in particular actually pulled me aside and tried to appeal to his mother's sensitivities. He said, well, my brother is a VP, and I can't go home and tell my mom I'm not anymore a VP. And I just thought of, the destructive nature of paternalism, destructive, and also in how you treat your kids. And I had to unlearn that in Norway. It's the same thing. I made mistakes, and I had teachers calling me in and saying, Robert, here in Norway, we don't see it that way. And one of my favorite stories, and my daughter was 14. I write about this in my book. And when she was 14, she came home and said, Dad, the my teacher excused me from algebra. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, she said, it's obvious that I'm going to be an artist. So she said, I don't have to take algebra. And I marched into the school and I said, my daughter can make that decision in college. And then we had this discussion, Catherine and I remember her telling me, Dad, and I warned her, well, I know you want to be an artist. And she had never put down her crayons. This is just kid. She's an artist. That's absolutely who she is. Um, but I had to argue with her. And I said, you need a backup plan. Life isn't like that. There are always bills. And she looked at me straight face and said, Dad, I don't care about money. And I thought that was so naive. And today she's an artist, and today I'm like to say I'm still trying to grow up to be my 14-year-old daughter. She was right, they were right. All of this bull crap that was put on me, and I just habitually put it on her. And that's back to abundance. In Norway, they built a society where if my son is called to gardening or fast food or art, or they're going to be okay. It's literally not an existential thing. Whereas where I grew up in Los Angeles, you better have a backup plan for your backup plan, because you're not going to have health care, you know. So I think, and I know this comes across politically. I'll confess to being a social democrat, but I do think it's not about politics. It's about creating the abundance before the individual. And then we can all, as individuals, we can, or more organically, um, unfold our actual identities. And so our independence is planted in a nourished bed, a nourished soil, instead of this sparse, scarce soil where only a few of these plants can thrive. They all thrive. So yeah, I think to your point about how you treat your kids, my kids after that, about that time, and they were just my best friends. And I remember coming home with them, and Kevin was 5 years younger. So Kevin and I have just always been closer than brothers in a way. It's a weird thing but I always got criticized for it here back at home. My parents, didn't approve of it. My friends have told me, you're too soft on them. They need to learn. They need to become hard. I'm just learning from them.
Oh my. Uh, I totally see what you're talking about. And a year ago, I decided to make a shift from what I was doing. And because I felt like all the things I was writing, I was just repeating myself. And so I said, I'm going to take a sabbatical from writing for 3 months. And it turned into 4 months. And I still did the podcast, but what I came to see was a couple of things. One was that I think you've described it in a certain way, that there's this generational memory that affects how we think of ourselves,
Yeah.
and that when we're free to see the good and also the less good in our past, then we're able to see ourselves in the same way, and we can and move forward in life. And so, what emerged from this was the need to spend more time with younger generations, particularly Gen Zs,
Right.
and out of that emerged this desire to write a novel. And I'm writing a novel about a young man who's 18. When he's 3, his parents die in a plane crash, and at 18, he feels like he needs to connect with his parents, and he does. And there's been no effort by his grandparents or his siblings to do this for him, and so he leaves school and he goes off to where the plane crash happens, and he becomes immersed in as their life in the last hours of their life. And he feels this bond to them now that he didn't have before. And what emerged, what is, I started talking about this with young people that I was meeting. I was telling them this story, and I would say to them, the thing that keeps coming back to me from talking with you all is this phrase: answers to questions never asked. Does
Mm,
that make any sense to you? And they just go, oh, yeah, that's exactly the way it is. So what does that mean to you? They says, oh, we're just told all these things we're supposed to know, but we're never told why. And we're not
mm,
really allowed to ask any questions about, well, why do we do it this way? We're just told that this is the way to do it. And I've talked to adults, not quite my age, but older people who have had businesses and they've had trouble in employing young people. And I said, well, why do you have trouble with them? Well, they just don't know anything. They don't know anything. I said, well, who is responsible for teaching them? I don't know, but they don't know anything. Well, it's this mismatch of all kinds of miscommunication and misunderstanding and lack of relationship that has occurred. So so
yeah.
what he's discovering, what this young man is discovering, is who he is and how his family has avoided the hard things in life because they think they're protecting the family from suffering or hardship or something.
Mm. That's a wonderful story. I look forward to it.
Yeah,
I think there's something in this, and I think maybe I have to confess that I think in some ways a church upbringing um, fills in some gaps that I think should be more, and the Scouts as well. Like these kind of institutions fill in some gaps for us
yeah,
to become well-rounded people. Like as if we need a reason to be good people, we introduce churches and organizations. But I think absent that, sometimes our society is so materialistic that when we talk about what are we protecting our children from? Material challenge, like material or identity, um, or not achieving the right identity, or so it's all sort of a. But do we talk enough about them? Um, about the shame. My worst fear for my children is that they retire at 69 and die at 71 because they never found out who they were.
yes,
Like, do we talk about the fact that, when do they unfold? And I really try hard to sort of find to recognize that we're spiritual creatures. Absent the religion I came up with, or someone else I was raised with, I'm starting to discover that one of our shortcomings in our culture um, is that we're either religious or atheist. We're not realize we're human, and humans have. As I really love Maslow's later work, The Further Reaches of Human Nature, and humans have. There's a whole side of us that we don't. That's poor. That's
Mhm.
poor. We're materially successful, or so we worry about whether they're materially successful, but we don't talk much about what they're happy. And I think the younger generation is some of the ones I've met, my kids, like my daughter saying, "I don't care about money." And what was my response? Oh, well, if you don't, I'm going to make you. If you're going to unfold organically, I'm going to stop that, and that, as if that's my job. And so coming to this sort of idea now that I have that I think the universe, however you want to phrase it in your context, uh, sends us here with something organic to unfold. And most of us in our society don't find it. We don't find it. Or if we do find it, it's post-retirement because we're put into this system that just sends us down this road of avoiding material trauma, avoiding embarrassment, avoiding humility. We got to be winners, and there's no second place, and I think that's the great tragedy that I was raised that way and almost passed it down on my children.
And I think the reason why it's this way is that parents feel inadequate to be parents and they don't want to be embarrassed within their circle of friends when their children don't succeed. And
Yeah,
and so I think it's so much of this culture is self-referential. I'm doing things to make myself feel safe or feel good, and I'm going to use the family unit for this and never acknowledge that I'm doing that. And I
yeah,
think that's what kids see.
yeah,
I know they see that.
yeah. They do absolutely. And what's amazing is any of the people whom of whom my children might have embarrassed me with years ago. Most of them aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
My children
Oh
are
yeah.
still my children are still my rock. And about the time I was really embracing Marshall Rosenberg, my son was he was about 18 or 19. And I wrote about this in a blog that I had to have his permission to put out there. But we blew up. He blew up, and he was living in his house, and he almost walked out of the house, and he was going. I knew it was a place where if we were screaming at each other, and I knew if I didn't give way, he would. I might not see him again. And this weird thing instinct inside me that was half American and half Norwegian gave way. I heard some voices saying "tough love," but part of it gave way, and I said, "What?" I just stopped and I said, "Hey, buddy, what are we doing? What are we doing here? We love each other." And I took it. I took it. I like to think like I stepped in front of the car for him. My ego had to be sacrificed, and it was maybe 5 years later. There's another story um, where we were in this situation again, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, buddy, what are we doing here?" And he stepped in front of the bus for me. And I'm just saying that kind of relationship. Who gives a shit if I'm someone doesn't approve of his choices? I don't I
That
don't care. That's my
and, and and that is actual genuine ego strength when you're
yeah.
willing to put yourself on the line.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things that also people don't get.
And
So
none of my friends have done that for me. It's my kids who do that for me. That's family.
I totally agree with you, and that's one of the reasons I'm writing this book because I want people I want family to become a topic of conversation with me worldwide. I want people to talk about their families with me, and by writing a novel about family, it enables for that to happen because this is where I'm going, Robert. I came into the world of leadership 40 years ago because I was an associate pastor in a downtown urban church where my role was all the ministries outside the doors of the church, and I got
Mm,
invited to be on a business association as the clergy representative. And
Mm.
this was a large group of 45 board members. And it had everything from global corporate senior vice president down to retired school teachers and everything in between, artists, musicians, small business owners, everything that was, and we were a business association for a community. And and what I found there was here were 45 people who are operating as one. I had never seen that before. I said, "Oh, so this is what leadership is."
Yes.
And at that point, that's when the leadership became my calling, and I started studying. Started taking some courses, and I realized I disagreed with almost everything I was reading, and it
Mm.
was because, as I came to be able to describe later, that I saw that all leadership begins with personal initiative. And
Yeah.
the structure of organizations needs to put people in a position where they can take initiative to make a difference that matters. But that's what I was not seeing that. So I've always had this kind of contentious relationship with organizations because I see that their people are not being able to serve at the level that they desire to serve because the structure has inhibited them from doing that. And I'll give you one. I've told this story a lot, but I'll tell you because I think you'll love this. So um, I was asked to do a webinar series for a large group within a global corporation, large global corporation, and this company was in trouble. It was having, let's just say, they were in deep trouble, and everybody in the world knew it. And here I'm coming in to work with just one division of the company and do leadership development. And and I was doing a webinar, so I decided I want to meet these people. I like connecting personally with them. So I said I'm going to go to their headquarters. I'm going to go there, and I want to go have lunch with them. So there were four guys that were running this program. I got to sit there and have lunch with them, and then one of them took me around their building, and they took me down into the division's C-suite. And
Mm.
there was a woman who immediately jumped up out of her chair when we walked in. This was on a Friday afternoon, and she was immaculately dressed. She was very attractive and extraordinarily formal, almost offensively formal
Mm.
towards us. And
Yeah.
my friend introduced me to her, and then I asked her this. I said, how long have you worked here?" And she said, "I am 48 years old, and I started when I was 20. So you've been
Wow.
here for 28 years. You must love this company." And because you don't stay in a place for 28 years unless you love the place. And I said, and I want you to understand what I've seen in my work. I see that there is a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people.
Yes.
And I want you to understand that this is a great company because of people like you.
Mm.
You're outlasting all the people that's above you up there in the C-suite. They're short termers. They're going to be here and they're going to be gone. They're going to move on to another company. They're going to take they're going to take their compensation and go on to the next stage. But you and people like you are going to be here, and you are the ones who make this a great company, and you should recognize that.
Yeah.
And her response was, and she fell down in her chair, and as if someone said, as if finally someone sees what we all know. And we are suffering because our company is suffering, but we're suffering because we love the company.
Mm. That's lovely. It's amazing how people uh, and I experience even when you tell the story, I can see almost tears.
Yeah,
But I think it's such a wonderful experience to when someone feels seen and validated for something simple like that. That okay, um, it's such a human need just to be seen, just to be, and that they will be reduced to tears of joy. And it's such an easy thing to
that's what
give.
we're doing.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to give away. I think that
Yeah.
sometimes I say like. the systems of scarcity are ridiculous because esteem isn't scarce. The more you see and give, the more there is. It creates more. And I think I believe anything short of that is the malpractice. And I think that the reason I'm kind of on an anti-leadership season is because um, I've seen real leadership. I've seen it like that. I've
Yeah,
seen it's a weird word, but I think it starts with self-compassion, self-love, and that and then doing so we create this. Because I think that maybe we see people the most when we see them through ourselves. We say, okay, because I think what this person, I don't know her, but I'm recognizing some of me in her and you and me and her. And I think it is, I believe one place I believe I'm a big Maslow fan, but I think he was wrong in some places, including this idea that a certain percentage of us are called to transcend. I think human beings are born to transcend. I think it's
I agree.
and that's all of us. But she was brave, and she spent 28 years, 20, yeah, um, uh, not being
That
seen,
was 8 years ago.
yeah, not being seen for what she was, but I think that's why when we create these ladders and then we create these gamified systems to climb them, um, we create people who are sitting or who are leading from a place of emotional immaturity and of underdevelopment, of fear with oxytocin, and and it's so unhealthy. And I really believe it leads all the way to war. It leads all the way to Gaza. It leads all the way to Iran and Ukraine. When we don't uh, see people like that, we don't unpack the human in there, and we. So I don't think we cry enough at work. I don't think we use enough language at work. I don't think we. I tell my colleagues that I love them, certain ones especially, but I also preface it with, we're such a limited language. In Norway, we have other words for that kind of love,
Yeah.
but we need to be able to. If someone's been working with me for 10 years and I don't love them in some form or fashion, something might be wrong, right? Humans do grow together when they're safe, when they're protected, when real leadership is present. And I just see such a dearth of that. Um, so I think we need fewer leaders. We need self leaders. We need self compassion. And then if somebody does stand up and say, I know where to take you. I'm going to take you. You better damn well take them someplace beautiful. You better have a vision. You better be coming from the right place. It needs to transcend your ego. Otherwise, I think I think of literally, I think it's like the Hippocratic Oath, right? That's why I say malpractice. I think it's like a doctor
Yeah.
treating patients with bad medicine. Um,
Well,
so
your uh, your blog post upon that
yeah.
not too long ago was really quite good. I
By the
totally.
way, thank you. I want to say this. I love it when somebody reads my stuff. It's just I feel seen. So thank you for mentioning the blog. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's a good.
yeah.
It's a. I mean, you're writing important things. Yeah.
Thank you,
And
sir.
um, so uh, one last thing to say, or to ask you,
Mm.
how would you like people to interact with you? Because obviously you like that. I mean, you want, but but you can't do it with everybody. And so if what you're talking about is something that kind of captures the fascination or the imagination of someone watching this, how, what is the best way for them to connect with you so that they may garner more of that kind of idea from you?
Oh, I really am touched by someone who picks up my book or my blog and comments or asks a question. I'm touched when somebody reaches out in LinkedIn and it's not an obvious AI, a transactional. I just really live for non-transactional discourse,
Yeah.
and I really live for feeding people. And so, if I get anybody who approaches with me with genuine needs, especially and then can feed me too. We'll find a way. I think
It's
these kind of
reciprocal.
things are beautiful. I'm starting a podcast this year, and I can invite you now to
Oh
come on
yeah.
back and see me. Um, I I love it when people recommend a book, and so I have a policy. If somebody says a book changed their life, I'm going to read it. The last one I got was Viktor Frankl. I can't
Yeah.
believe I hadn't read this, but um,
I think I
the
can
one on human
invite you.
meaning.
Yeah, right there. So that's
Yeah,
not
if
the
you
book.
exactly. I can't believe I hadn't read that before. It absolutely changed my life. So I think, and there's a guy named David Brooks at Yale, and I just came across him this week. He did a lecture. It's on YouTube. Um, and I think just the more he's talking about a moral reframing that it's a very positive view of where we're heading as a culture. And I think that I bring that up because I love sharing stuff like that. It's one of the best. It's about an hour lecture on YouTube. Um, but I say that because I think that I'm sensing the same thing, and I really want to surround myself with people that are sensing the same thing. We need to turn off the negative right, left wing discourse, and we need to rediscover humanity in each other. And just like so, anytime I can touch another human being, human, and those tears and all, that's my dig. I'm happy if somebody can cry with me. I'm usually for a long time I was alone in that regard. Um, uh, so yeah, so I don't know. Other than that, I'm happy to be invited to discussions. I get desperate sometimes. I actually last year, my wife and I did a retreat in Norway. We paid for it and invited half a dozen or 8 or 9 of my favorite people there, and we sat in a cabin for 3 days, fishing and nothing pedagogic, just fishing and exposure to this pace of life and I don't know why I did that, but I might do that again. It's on my site because I might do that again. That's beautiful to me. And I'll finish with this slight story. Um, I miss that in Norway we had these beautiful conversations because we were so just kind of equals. The egalitarian part of it facilitates debate about politics, sports without pain. And the other night, we had I invited some of my colleagues from one of our sister companies to my house, about four of them and my wife and I. And we sat down for dinner, and one of them had read my book, and she mentioned the word hygge, which is a cozy word in Norwegian. And so we're having a discussion about whether to eat, to do it American style and grab your food and walk around the house, or to sit at the table. And I mentioned just briefly, I said, just so you know, the table is set because that's my wife is Norwegian, and I think she would honestly prefer that. So everybody said, of course, yes, let's go sit at the table. So we sat around the table, and one of them said to me, "This, as we're talking, this is hygge, right? This is, yeah, this is hygge." And we had so because we were sitting with each other, we were present with each other, and then we went up after dinner, sat by a fire, and talked about the politics and all the things. And I think Huxley came up, and somebody was a vegetarian, and why or why not. And we had these deep conversations, and there's a politically diverse group. We had these present, deep conversations. And I said a few times, I said stuff like, "This is beautiful. Isn't this beautiful?" And that's almost a Norwegian phrase. When you call a meeting in Norway, it's very common to put a little disclaimer in the meeting, even if it's two guys, and which made me feel a little weird at first, but he said, "Hey, Robert, we're going to meet on Friday after lunch, and that will be hyggelig, means that will be cozy, that will be." And I'm like, "Why are these guys telling me it's going to be?" They were setting the table. They were setting the table. Every
Yeah.
single meeting, there was chocolate, there was candles, there was cookies
Oh,
sometimes. They were intentionally setting the table for these conversations instead of bumping into each other, in this toxic, coarse discourse that we have in this country. We need to set the table. Like what you're doing with this podcast. I can see it. You're just setting the table and having some random person come in and have a real conversation. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to do, set the table.
if I may make a suggestion to you,
Sure.
um, that you and your wife write a pamphlet on this.
Okay.
Because I think that what happens around a dinner table
Mhm.
is um, is is an expression of how those people see each other in relationship.
Mm.
And uh, too often, people are sitting at the table and they're scrolling on their phones, or they eat and then they're up and they're gone to, some do something else. It's just like traveling through a gas station and filling up and moving on. When what should happen is we're going to sit here a while. See, if I came to your house,
Yeah,
I would sit at your dining room table and I would be the last one to leave the table because I would be honoring your wife
yeah,
because that's what she has set the table for.
absolutely. Yes.
And I think when we become aware of the things that matter to people, we then honor them by aligning ourselves with them in those things. Um,
Yeah. And I think collectively, that's the diagnosis, right? I think
yeah,
collectively as a society,
yes.
we need to sit down collectively and see people. And I'm as bad as anyone else, just wanting to consume information and engage in irresponsible, toxic discourse, and feed on it. But it's poison. So, and I only think so. This is kind of the whole story of my life. When I was 19, I met a Norwegian girl. That's if not for that, I would be a different person right now.
I see that, and you're a blessed man for it.
I think I
And
agree.
you need to let her know that the world sees that now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We talk about it all the time, and she's just typical of Norwegians. She'll argue about any impact on my life. But her family, everything, and I think that's why I write because I want to just I'm trying desperately to give people a taste of something that I think will change their life, and I don't know what portion or what place or what media will help. It's a burning building. I just feel like I want this. I want us to have this, and so I try every different way I can to say it. Like, come to the table.
Well, I believe in what you're doing. I love what you're doing, and I feel
Likewise.
very,
Yeah.
very close to what you're doing. And whatever I can do to support you in this, I'd be glad. I'm there because
Likewise. Well, I'm learning from you. Yeah.
because I want I want in businesses and in schools and in churches and in the military. I want people
Yeah.
to respect one another and so they may trust one another and be mutually giving, appreciative, and accountable to one another. I want all those things to happen. And I think we're at a time where those things can happen. And all we must do is say, I'm going to make it happen. It's just a yes thing now, because I
Absolutely.
don't think there are any barriers to doing that now. The barriers are falling away, and we can be those kinds of people, and we will just find ourselves being gravitating towards other people who want to be the same way, and then we're building parts of the new society as a result.
And I think absolutely. And I think my hope is that, to my point, Maslow was wrong. This and so are modern day um, antagonists in the political spectrum. This is a universal need. I can promise you, nobody's going to argue with you about the stuff we just talked about. They know it somewhere in their heart. They know it. We just need the space to reflect. And so what breath I have left in this body and life on this planet, I want to make. I want to heal it.
Yeah.
And all it takes is getting back. Just to say, like, now go read the red words in the book in the gospel. Just go and so you start to like, okay, Jesus' message was, there is enough, feed each other, love one another, um, reject materialism, reject the competitive individualism, um, uh, suffer the children, just wake up and set the table. He also set the table, so
Oh, yeah, it's there. It is there.
there. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, I
well,
I
thank
really, I
you.
really see you, and I really appreciate the stuff you do in the world. And
Thank you.
I'm learning from you, and I'll have you come visit me on the new blog sometime later this year.
Okay, we'll do that, and we'll have you back on here when the new book comes out because
Sounds
we
great.
want to talk
Yeah,
about it.
sounds
And to
great.
all of you who are watching, um, go go hang out with someone and just listen.
Mm.
Let them tell you a story, or just listen to them and appreciate who they are, and and then tomorrow do the same with someone else, and just begin to develop a pattern of behavior where you're constantly listening and appreciating the people that cross your path every day. And if you do that, you'll be headed in the right direction. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And thank you all. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.